Birthright's biggest accomplishment is refining the core gameplay of Awakening to provide a more challenging experience while retaining its accessibility through the ability to grind and the return of casual mode. Some people have criticized the new Phoenix mode for taking things one step too far, but that mode wasn't made for hardcore tactics enthusiasts that carefully plan out every move, who will no doubt reset the game when their favorite character dies. It was made for those who solely want to enjoy the story and characters, not the gameplay. To quote Masahiro Higuchi one more time, "We thought the casual mode would allow 100% of players to play through the end of the main story, but there were still people who didn't play until the end. So instead of lowering the difficulty even more, we made something called Phoenix mode for if. As the name indicates, this allows a character to come back to life at their next turn."
So yeah, the complaints about this mode are mostly ridiculous, especially when you consider that the people who are complaining about this aren't even gonna touch it. I mean, I'm not gonna use it because, well, that's not how I play Fire Emblem.
Everybody lives, Rose. Just this once! Everybody!
I swear, you are so lucky that I like you, Hana. I swear, 35%. I'll show you 35% chance to hit.
In addition to the constant challenges and paralogs that pop up on the map, you can now spend money to scout for enemies to fight. Enemies who usually carry a small amount of gold, making scouting essentially spending money to make money, along with gaining extra experience. While that might sound like a potential game breaker, enemy levels this time around are tied to their locations, making it relatively difficult and tedious to simply scout for foe after foe and grind during the earlier segments of Birthright. Though spending some extra time with these challenges is advised to familiarize yourself with perhaps the biggest change in all of Fates. Ever since Seisen no Keifu, Fire Emblem has featured what's known as the Weapons Triangle. A triangle that goes swords beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat swords. Depending on the game, there might be a magic-based variant, but for the most part, the weapons were kept to a very simple game of rock, paper, scissors. Fates takes this concept to the next level, bringing in nearly every weapon type into a new triangle, or rather a weapon hexagon, with magic and swords sharing the same strengths and weaknesses, hidden weapons like shurikens and daggers sharing a likeness to lances, and axes being on par with bows in terms of their booms and busts. Only stone-based weaponry is truly exempt from any benefit or hindrance this system provides, and even those have their own quirks to them. Despite being a bit tricky to get used to thanks to the terrible tutorial of an opening, this new trinity makes for a much more complex and strategic battle system, one more focused on balancing between an effective use of weaponry, both long and short range. That's the key word to keep in mind when playing Birthright. Balance. Although the removal of weapon durability for all but staves that accompanies this paradigm shift sounds like it would be ripe for abuse, it's actually a change for the better since in addition to being more costly than before, weapons have been tweaked to accommodate their now infinite usage, like the Brave variety only being able to attack multiple times when used for the initial attack, or ranged spears and swords not being able to attack twice or trigger skills, steel weapons being more difficult to wield and lower speed. All these changes and more make the weapons more interesting while preventing the most powerful weapons from being completely overused. Furthermore, while Hoshido weaponry like Yumi and Naginata appear to be bows and lances by different names, they're made more unique compared to their Norien counterpart thanks to a slight boost or bane to certain stats. Though the weapons are functionally identical to previous games in terms of usability, i.e. swords and katana being lower than average in terms of power but highly accurate, there are minor tweaks that make the ones obtained on the Birthright route more beginner-friendly and useful, like routes being able to reach an extra space than staves, being able to better cure injured units without placing the healer in any real danger. It all makes for the most diverse and worthwhile set of weapons in a Fire Emblem game. Or at least for almost all kinds of weapons, since magic, once a relatively unique kind of weapon, has been thoroughly compressed and turned into a more generic form of weaponry for magically inclined units. The new unit types that wield these are not quite as refined as they could have been. Ninjas are a neat take on the Thief class, mostly as a utility unit for weakening dangerous foes with the shurikens they throw, while Oni Savages are serviceable at best, only seeing the usage they do due to the lack of axe wielders on the Birthright path. A fair amount of these new classes only differ from previous games by name, for example Soldier and Spearfighter, at best being differentiated by the skills they gain. Speaking of classes, the ability to reclass is more reliant on supports than before, with the new A+ support granting an additional class to change into when using a friendship seal, while the partner seal allows any S-rank supporters to freely change between each other's classes. It's a bit cumbersome at first to get used to all these new items, as well as second seals being renamed to heart seals for some reason, but not altogether annoying to get used to. Yet again, the attempt to keep Fate's balance is present, as none of these seals reset your level, units only being able to gain 40 levels at most, earning new stats and skills. Unless they use the new Eternal Seal to gain 5 more levels, but those are expensive, are only available very late into the game, and are generally not worth the cost compared to stat boosting items and purchasing skills from defeated street passers. On the subject of skills, in addition to the 5 slots to be filled up by ones earned through leveling up or the aforementioned purchasing possibility via street pass, each character has their own personal skill, making each unit feel more unique along with the personalities they exemplify in support conversations, although some of them are less helpful than others. Looking at you, Rinka. When it comes to unit usability, Birthright even manages to nail this aspect, making pre-promoted units, in spite of their tendency to be outclassed by other similarly classed characters that are available at an earlier point like previous games tend to, more than viable assets throughout the entire game, though again, part of that might come from how ineffective certain units become once the difficulty ramps up. Did I mention that Rinka is bad? Because she is pretty bad. Well, then again, ramp up might be a bit inaccurate because, while still an overall challenging game, Birthright's difficulty tends to fluctuate from map to map rather than remain on a slow upward curve, with some particularly nasty spikes in the latter half of the game. The easily broken up pair-up system from Awakening has seen a thorough retooling with the new attack stands and guard stands. With the attack stands, one adjacent unit will automatically join in on the assault, assuming they can attack, albeit at half the damage they would normally deal, and without the ability to activate any of their skills. Though it's only one additional attack, the outcome goes a long way in emphasizing the importance of unit positions than ever before, since enemies can just as easily wear you down with a flurry of follow-up attacks adding up, as does the minute amount of experience that supporting allies gain for attacking. Likewise, the restrictions on supporting units helps to ensure that its usefulness doesn't sacrifice balance or allow it to be abused, never approaching the broken borders of the dual system in Awakening. While pairing up two units does give a boon to the lead stats, it no longer allows the supporting unit to attack, the real benefit coming from the guard stance blocking any attacks from any supporting foes, and, after building up on the bottom screen, guarantee protection from a potentially deadly initial hit, which comes in handy during the occasional defense or escape mission. That said, one minor disappointment is that enemies never choose to partner up with one another. Sometimes the unit will already be paired up at the beginning of a battle, but as for watching out for any potential pairings between foes, it's a non-factor on normal difficulty. Outside of battling through chapters and challenges or fending off invaders, there's the magnificent new My Castle feature, which serves as a sort of hub in place of the menu from Awakening, an enhancement to the overworld Street Pass features from that game. In this mode, you can build multiple facilities ranging from weapon shops and statues to forts and lotteries, upgrading each as seen fit, at least once the game allows it. What's most surprising about this edition is how it continues to exhibit Fate's numerous fixes to flaws in former Fire Emblem games, the most notable being how it resolves one of those problematic elements in the entire series, the arena. In previous Fire Emblem games, you could have one of your units enter an arena to face off against an enemy by betting a small sum of gold, the prize for winning being double your money and some experience points. Unfortunately, due to the low cost of stays to heal any damage taken during the fight and the limited amount of times one could enter them, this made it was fairly easy to grind a grand amount of gold while leveling up units to their maximum level given the right amount of time, completely destroying any difficulty with what has been coined arena abuse. The only game that didn't have this issue was Rekka no Ken, namely because it evaluated the player on, among other factors, how fast they completed a map, meaning spending hundreds of turns taking a shot at the arena would result in a poor overall rank. Unexpected as its return in Fates may be, it is a welcome one because of how it settles the previous incarnation's problems. Instead of gaining gold and more experience, you bet on resources for more resources. No experience, no gold, just more food and gems. While the random selection of participants might seem like a mild annoyance, enemy units are scaled against the participant's level, so it's always a fair fight no matter who's chosen. Best of all, units that lose in the arena will always walk out alive. Thus, the only loss that occurs is whatever materials made up the ante. There is a remarkable amount of tasks to do, ranging from outfitting warriors with weapons bought on sale, reading through a slew of wonderful support conversations, gathering food to feed your troops. It's surprisingly beefy for what could have been a throwaway hub world. What's more, it ties itself terrifically well into the tactics portion of the game. Anytime you beat a challenge, invasion, or chapter, you earn Dragon Vein points, which you use to build or upgrade the My Castle's many features. The more DVP you earn, the more buildings can be placed or upgraded, which encourages going through as many challenges as are available for the most amount of and best versions of each one. The only oddity to be found with it, and it's a nitpick at that, is how completely divorced from the game's narrative the My Castle feature is. After a brief introduction upon choosing your path and even more brief tutorial, it's completely ignored. The new Dragon Vein command is a welcome way to shake up the maps, both visually and strategically. One might cause the path to go from open to closed, another propping up spikes out of the ground and hurting stationary enemies. Though a bit infrequent at the beginning of Birthright, the changes they bring help keep things from growing stale, often being just as hindering as they can be helpful. Sometimes it's better to save a vein until more enemies close in, or your units move out to maximize their effectiveness. Even certain enemies can use them against you, facilitating even more precaution with every action. The one minor issue about the Dragon's Vein is that, since only units with dragon blood can use it, it places priority on the royal family members that possess it, rather than experimenting with other troops. Not that giving two of them exclusive and powerful weapons with zero drawback makes the decision between units of the same class and them any more obvious. In general, map design is a marked improvement over Awakening, aided by a much healthier variety of missions, ranging from the typical Waroh rogues to a very tricky escape from a near impossible fight. There's only a single legitimately bad one among them. Chapter 20, which takes place inside of a fort made out of a dragon that's slowly coming back to life. As amazing as this may sound, it's pretty dull. The only notable part about the map is the acid that damages your troops. Acid that is easily removed by just using the Dragon Vein mere steps away. This might have worked if the Dragon Vein command was a one-time per unit ordeal, or if the acid slowed unit movement, but as is, the gimmick is neither clever nor interesting enough to be the focus of an entire map, let alone one as uneventful as this that feels so hastily thrown together to justify an admittedly awesome backstory for a castle. Even the initial damage from the acid can be recovered if you place Azura in the right spot. On the whole, there's not a lot else to complain about. While map design is a solid series of locales, the overworld is completely muddled, a confusing mess that makes it difficult to figure out where exactly your party is currently located and where best your scouting money is spent. Puzzling geography aside, Birthright is a tasty tactical treat that takes a fantastic base of a game and distills it down to its core, before adding its own succulent flavor. Being a sequel to Awakening on the same system, naturally Fate shares the same game engine, with Fate's assets featuring far more details, along with one major tweak. Whenever you engage an enemy unit, the camera zooms into the battle when it begins, and zooms back out after the battle concludes. It's a neat way of transitioning between the battle screens and the map, without resorting to the constant black fade seen in pretty much every other entry in the series, while simultaneously upping the amount of detail seen in the backgrounds, with houses close by appearing to the side, changes to the map by a Dragon Vein being reflected in the new terrain. That said, this zoom isn't completely accurate. Attacking behind a wall usually results in a character being in front when facing an enemy, and there are some locations where the water effects don't match with the liquid the characters are standing in, but all nitpicks aside, it manages to make the transition from map to battle more dynamic and interesting in a similar manner to the Game Boy Advance entries. That's in addition to the camera presenting the battles at a far more interesting angle, with corridors showing combat behind the character's back. All character models and weapons have noticeably more refined details to their textures, while newer ones have a bit more flair to their movement, so while faster characters still lack a sense of speed, at least they have a bit more energy to the way they run, or rather jog, and attack. The soundtrack is yet another magnificent set of sweeping songs, more than worthy of having a place alongside the series' finest scores like Seisen no Keifu and Rekka no Ken. Even the vocal tracks are astoundingly good, lack of subtlety in the lyrics aside.
Get it? Because you're heartbroken over abandoning your old family, but you're embracing the light side and your new peace-loving family. Trust me, it is nowhere near as unsettled as Conquest's take on the scene. Because of course Conquest has the tougher take on the scene. You all saw the trailers.
There's not really much else to say about it, mostly because there's only so many ways to say it's fantastic. That and, well, I'd prefer not to get hit with another copyright claim for using the music associated with a given game from Nintendo. Equally as striking are the cutscenes, which have never looked better. Is what I would say if they weren't on the 3DS's pitifully low-resolution screen, but unfortunately they look a little compressed on it. Still, there is a lot of detail to be found in these beautiful feasts for the eyes. Much like the game's engine, Birthright shares another common piece of its presentation with Awakening, namely Yusuke Kozaki. Yes, he's responsible for much of the character's artwork, or at least rendering them. Without wishing to retread my criticisms of his work made in my Awakening review, Yusuke Kozaki is a good artist. Heck, he did a great sketch for Fire Emblem's 25th anniversary. Mind you, I don't recall which game the cat donut appeared in, but still, it's a great rendering of the series' many protagonists. But as for his original creations in Birthright, while they're not bad in and of themselves, they're certainly well drawn, the majority of them don't fit in with the game's setting. The reason Travis Touchdown worked so well in No More Heroes was because he was designed to be a satire of Westerners obsessed with Eastern culture in a game that deconstructed modern gaming and gaming culture. His style just isn't suited for a fantasy realm played completely straight, full of samurai, shape-shifting monsters, and dragons, although, in fairness, Corrin's dragon design is perhaps the best in the entire series, an excellent exception that's both familiar, yet somehow very alien. One might be quick to point to the art director, Toshiyuki Kozakihara, for the outlandish armor some characters may don. However, Kozaki's rendering of them does neither any favors. Frankly, it just makes me long for Senrikita's delightful designs from Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, whose armor designs were not only form-fitting and practical, but also imposing and, dare I say, sexy for the women and men wearing them in those games.
Ugh, I feel dirty for giving Radiant Dawn any kind of praise. Need a shower.
There are other problems to be had with the character artwork, but we'll get to the big one when we tackle Conquest because, in all fairness, the character artwork is a lot more reserved in the Birthright route. As an aside, whenever you change your weapon before a battle, the character's portrait may change depending on the outcome, usually to a more silly face. It's cute, but ultimately pointless.
However, none of that matters. You wanna know why? Because we have feet! Miss the old friend.
The voice acting is a mixed bag. Some characters absolutely nail what little they're given to work with.
You were not hurt. Tell me you're okay. I'm fine. I'm so glad.
Whereas others are clearly in need of better direction. But, yet again, the biggest problem isn't what we do here, it's what we don't. And I don't mean the original Japanese voice work. Outside of the occasional cutscene, most of the voice work is cut to confession conversations and quips in battle, the latter of which wear out the welcome very quickly when it would have been doubly beneficial to have them voice more lines of dialogue, allowing the actors more time and opportunity to familiarize themselves with the characters they're playing rather than just having one or two lines about how they love you. It's astounding how such talented voice actors are wasted on what amounts to a handful of lines each.
All nitpicks aside, Fire Emblem Birthright is a marked improvement over Awakening in almost every area. Almost.
While the story certainly aspires to tell a more epic tale than the past few entries, it's a grand example of a concept being more interesting on paper than the actual words being put to pen on said paper. Still, if you can overlook the overly dull-written drivel of a plot, you'll find another stellar tactics title, one of the best the series has to offer.
In the next part, we're going to take a look at Fire Emblem Conquest, the path with the overall best gameplay, and quite possibly the worst story in the entire series. But until next time is gonna be a doozy. But until then, game on, my friends.